This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider. If the lifting of some lockdown restrictions had you thinking of letting your guard down, the messaging from government today may be alarming. A minister has told the Evening Standard they're considering imposing quarantine measures on some countries amid fears of a second coronavirus wave, and that could jeopardise the planned reopening of schools in September. In fact, with cases increasing rapidly in some parts of Europe, it's reported the Prime Minister fears COVID-19 could make a resurgence in the UK within 2 weeks. Our editorial column says it's essential Downing Street gets a counter-strategy up and running now.
The looming new risk makes it critical for those who govern us to secure our trust through sensible, swift, targeted action that avoids spreading panic and a defensive mindset. Unfortunately, the jury remains out on their ability to do this. Ministers were right to introduce quarantine in the face of rising infections in Spain, but the flip-flopping since is in danger of eroding public confidence. Ministers need to be ahead of the game with clear, well-communicated plans, rather than appearing to be making policy on the hoof.
Well, it's the airports where those policies are hitting right now. Spain's on a quarantine list, others may follow. Travel agencies and airlines are up in arms, and travel journalist Simon Calder is with me now. Simon, does anyone know what's going on?
No, exactly. Nobody knows, but they are getting increasingly angry. We are seeing what we've seen really for the last 4 months since lockdown began is the travel industry obviously imploding, losing billions of pounds, but sitting on its hands largely, thinking, OK, well, we're going to need to get some help from the government, so we better be quite sort of polite. But that's all now been abandoned. You've got EasyJet Holidays saying, come on, give us a clue. ABTA, the Travel Association, who normally are quite meek when it comes to government, saying, please give us the data on which you're basing your decisions, because actually this yo-yoing, on the 10th of July saying, hey, everybody, why don't you go to sunny Spain? On the 15th saying, actually, no, we think it's now too dangerous, but you're all right, perhaps on the islands. And then 2 days after that, oh, no, you can't go to the islands either. And compounding that with what we've heard in the past 2 days with Boris Johnson saying, there could well be a second wave. Nobody knows what's going on. And then Oliver Dowden, the culture secretary, coming out and saying, you can book a holiday if you want. But frankly, we're playing, as the boss of Heathrow put it, quarantine roulette. Nobody knows it. I actually call it the martini menace, because it could happen anytime, any place, anywhere. You've booked a lovely holiday and then you find that, actually, you've got to sit in your house or your flat for 2 weeks when you get home.
And just before we started recording this for the podcast, Simon, you heard from some news from British Airways, didn't you?
And this is all part of the same sort of pattern. British Airways has, I think, the finest headquarters building of any airline I've ever seen. It's called Waterside, built in 1998, beautifully laid out, loads of space, set in this kind of very ornate landscape park with lots of water features. It's a great place to work. However, it's been largely empty, of course, since lockdown, people working from home. And now we understand that it's going to be largely mothballed for at least 6 months in a bid to cut costs. Just shows what's going on. And on Tuesday night, they were auctioning off some of the artworks from their collection, which raised, I think, £1.8 million, which is only a blip. That's sort of, that'll keep them going for an afternoon at the moment. But it's still better than nothing. And it just shows how much they're desperate to cut costs, given the appalling situation that they are facing.
And that's a very stark, very visible consequence of what's happening and the uncertainty that's being caused by coronavirus and this fear of a second wave. Something that the boss of Heathrow was calling for was to test people as they come through the airport. Is that a practical idea, Simon?
Well, look, he was absolutely clear and refreshingly so, I must say, because there's been quite a lot of tosh talked by the aviation industry about how, it's fine, just test people before they get on the plane or test them when they get off, and that we'll all be quote safe. Of course we won't. It's all about managing risk. And he is perfectly prepared to talk through the fact that if you test people as soon as they arrive, they're negative, you then test them again after 5 days, you're going to catch, I think, 85% of any possible cases. If you leave it for another couple of days, you're going to capture 94 or so. And the whole idea is that basically you find that almost all the risk has disappeared, and that in fact you are in you're able to start intercontinental air travel again in a meaningful way and avoid all these sudden nasty quarantines. And I was talking to him earlier, and he said that really keen to set up a pilot project, no pun intended, with Singapore and with Canada, really important markets for Heathrow, not being served to any scale at the moment. And that, they hope, would kind of be able to persuade people that it's all right to fly again, and persuade the authorities it's all right. And quite significantly, they are much more business destinations than the current upset, which is, of course, all about Spain and the environs.
Do we know any more about any more countries going on the quarantine list, Simon?
Oliver Dowden was refusing to be drawn on this. He was the culture secretary was asked about it, and he said, "quote, we're not going to give running commentaries on this." I mean, you can go. The trouble is, David, the data. So I've done a story about how actually it's perfectly all right to go to a country which has a infection rate which is 1,382% higher than the UK's. That is Luxembourg. But of course, the Luxembourgeois say, well, that's only because we test pretty much everybody. We've tested some of them twice, and the more you test, the higher the infection rates. And so, therefore, looking at the raw data, even if it is properly sourced, for example, by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, that is going to give you a whole lot of numbers, which on the face of it make it look as though Spain, Portugal are kind of looking really serious. But there's other reasons at work. And that almost takes us back to the start, which is that the travel industry wants to know how the decisions are being made, partly because they actually can then watch trends. If they know what trends to watch, they will be in a better position when suddenly everything is called off. And secondly, because they also think it will put pressure on the government not to make kind of sudden decisions of the sort we saw on Saturday night, which I've never in all my years seen before.
And you can keep up with the latest developments on the potential second wave with the Evening Standard's live blog at standard.co.uk.